All right, welcome to another episode of Start Proto's ProtoCast. Today we have with us Jake Hall, who refers to himself as the Manufacturing Millennial. He's real big on getting, the younger crowd involved in manufacturing, very much in tune with kind of what we're trying to do at Start Proto as well. Welcome to the show.
Hey Tim, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Cool. Yeah, I guess just a brief intro for those who don't know you. What do you do? How'd you get into this? Start there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my background in manufacturing goes back to when I was in high school. So my first job was working for a custom automation machine builder. At the time, they were a small company. Now they're much bigger. Was JR Automation. And if you're in the Midwest area, you probably know who they are. They're a $1 billion company that was purchased by Hitachi a few years ago. But I was their broom boy. Where in high school, I went around. There was a facility, or I guess a group called JR2 back in the day, and I swept all the floors. I blew off all the manual mills, like the one that you have behind me, just cleaning off those bridge ports and wiping them down every day, and getting my hands dirty with cutting. I was able to work the saw a little bit too and cut a bunch of tubes and stocks and grind them over and deburr them, and then go out to the acetone container and pump out acetone and wipe it down. Which for me was, being as a high school kid, that was a phenomenal experience for me, just to understand what was happening, and I got to see a lot of custom automation and machinery being built over that time. Was involved with FIRST Robotics when I was in high school. I would say that was a big impact to get me into the manufacturing career that I am today. So after graduating high school, I went to Grand Valley. I got a manufacturing engineering degree, which was an awesome experience, part of their PDM program. And then after that, went into automation, distribution, and sales. So I sold, worked for like 60 different manufacturers, each that had, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of products that they represented. And, it sold everything from vision to sensors to cameras to robots, conveyors, motion control, safety. And for me, that was probably the best thing that could have happened to early on in my career, because I was able to understand all these different manufacturing processes that happen in all these different types of industries. Because when you're a distributor, you might be working for an automotive company that's a tier 1, and then go over to a tier 3, and then you might be working for a casting, or then you might be going into a wood furniture, and then you might be heading over to food processing, and then doing something with medtech or pharma. So for the 7 years that I was there, I had a tremendous amount of positive experience understanding how all these different industries work and the types of products and solutions that are needed in each one. The next step in my career was during 2020 when the pandemic happened. I switched and went to another job, and we all had to work from home. So all the new customers that I was trying to bring on board and connect with and network with, I couldn't go and travel to see them because not a lot of them were, quote unquote, essential workers in a lot of cases. So that's when the Manufacturing Millennial brand started, of when I started to then say, okay, if I can't see them in person, I'm going to try and find another way to connect with them other than just like emails and phone calls and like stuff like that. So started, with a LinkedIn profile and connected with my customers. And then I just started sharing videos on what was happening in the industry, trends, talking about workforce, talking about the direction of digitalization and new technology and robotics. And this was before the whole AI buzz thing happened. But, there's a lot of cool tech that, people wanted to know what impact it would make. And so from there, really kind of the rest is history, where all of a sudden my videos and my brand kept growing more and more, and I tried to attend more shows and create content out of those shows and advocate for future workers and talk more about millennials and Gen Zs and how we can do a better job getting them excited to be a part of our industry. And so that's kind of the Manufacturing Millennial brand, where I'm an outspoken millennial who loves the industry, who wants to see more kids. I guess we're not kids anymore. Millennials are adults, but more millennials and this next gen of Gen Zs and the kids out there, saying, what, manufacturing has a lot of opportunities regardless of, the career path that you take. If it's a 4-year degree, if it's a 2-year associate's degree, if it's a skilled trades, if it's an apprentice, if it's going right to work into manufacturing, there's so many different opportunities that suit everyone's needs depending on the career that they want to choose.
Cool. Yeah, I guess with that, dive a little bit more into kind of when you got started. What did manufacturing look like then? We're both millennials, but I think we're on slightly opposite ends of that spectrum. What was that like?
we could take it in two different approaches. One would be technology, another one would be culture. Let's start with technology first. And so, like, I remember hanging out at like JR Automation when I was in high school, and I remember Fanuc America, the big industrial robot
Yep.
manufacturer out there. I remember them dropping off any new tech that was there. So seeing like a super early Delta spider robot, doing some stuff in a room that was for R&D that wasn't released yet, or when Kuka was throwing out some of the really early collaborative robots. And seeing a cobot for the first time before it was even really hitting the market, and like with what UR was doing, it was really cool. For me, really early on in my career when I was still in high school, to see that technology. But like for me, when I was hitting the starting off as a young outside sales professional at the time, the industry was unique because it was really very much a handshake, who mindset from in person, and talking that way. And like, in order to get into a building, you had to know someone else to get you into that building, versus today with how active LinkedIn now is in terms of technology. I don't need to know someone to get in that building. I can go on LinkedIn and find that connection of that job title that I'm looking for, where now all of a sudden it's no longer having a Rolodex of business cards. It's who are you connected with online through social media and LinkedIn that's going to get you in. It's like that totally changed the way where, there was this thing at one point in time called like a blind sales call. Those just don't exist anymore. And if you still think a blind sales call exists, you have no idea a lot of times the resources or probably what you're doing with your job. If you're going into a meeting asking, who do I talk to on this? There's the resources are out there to know who to talk to, or who to connect with to get to the person that you're talking with. So like technology has made the sales profession a lot, quote unquote, easier, I would say, but also more difficult, because then other people are also using that to compete for that same sale and that same opportunity. But like watching technology emerge as well has been super exciting. So I focused a lot on vision products and solutions when I was at the distributor, and watching like basic like area measurement functions for doing like area measurement on like a 255 white black scale to do quality inspections, to like more I guess more complex measurements, to then all of a sudden working with a company called Vidi, which was really pushing the boundaries of AI inspection, which was then eventually acquired by Cognix. And playing with some of the really early AI based tools for vision inspection and modeling. It was really exciting. So seeing that seeing that change over time has been really fun. From a tech side. From a culture side, it's a whole other world as well. Especially for me as a person who's trying to advocate to get younger generations of millennials and Gen Zs and get more diversity. I'm a girl dad, and I would love both of my girls to be a part of this industry at one way or another. And that's really for them to decide. I can encourage them, but it's for them to decide the route that they want to take. But for me, like, I remember when I was in outside sales, I would walk into all these maintenance shops. And I would say 50% of the maintenance shops that I would walk into, and this would have been the 2010 era, between 2010 to 2015, 2016, it was not uncommon to walk in and see like a Playboy spread or a Sports Illustrated, posters all over the maintenance tech's room and mounted on the toolboxes on the crib, or, people would have, they would open up the front of their toolkit, and then you would have, a calendar on there. And all of a sudden, as a guy at the time who didn't have daughters, it was one of those things where I didn't really think twice of it. And then all of a sudden, when all of a sudden you have a couple girls in the industry, a couple young girls who might be in part of the industry that you're super passionate about, then all of a sudden you say, okay, would I want my daughters working in that atmosphere where all of a sudden, there's, the culture of what women are in the industry is automatically defined by what's happening. So that's one thing that I would change as well. Is the industry, I would say, has improved a lot. It's got a long way to go, But like the one thing I would say is walking on the floor, you're not seeing that stuff. You're not seeing as many derogatory terms and crude jokes made, and you see more and more women professionals in the industry. In fact, the last I was just talking beforehand where I went to go tour a forging facility yesterday, and I was talking with the plant manager there, and they said, yeah, we had a woman apply, but years ago, and she said, no, I don't want to work there because I'll be the only female. Where all of a sudden they have 6 females working at the company now, and just to see it at a 5-year pan, where all of a sudden when one comes on board, then another one, then another one, then another one, and it's hard always to be that first. But all of a sudden, I'm seeing more and more companies that are doing a really good job on bringing more diversity into the industry. Which is what I'm super excited about as well. Because if we want to get young generations excited, we have to get all generations excited about it. So yeah, I think, does that kind of cover your from
Yeah, I
going
mean,
back to
definitely
history?
a very different world. I mean, we've seen. I mean, obviously, we work with a lot of smaller, kind of 30 to kind of under 30 or 40 person companies, right? And in those, again, massive spread. You'll walk into some of them, and usually stuff like that isn't front and center, but it depends, right? But
Yeah,
we've had some of our more recent customers, right? The people who end up getting the place organized, modernizing it, are the younger generation, right? It's an old industry, but a lot of the people we deal with, right, are that 25 to 40 demographic who are
yeah.
taking these shops, cleaning them up, right, putting systems in place and making it a place that is way more efficient, right? So
Yeah.
like affects the bottom line, but also helps kind of attract that next generation.
And to add on to that as well, like the one thing that I'm noticing more and more is, as these younger generations begin to um, to get higher and more, I guess you could say, get more leadership roles in the industry. The adoption of technology and the way of doing things differently is rapidly changing as well. You walk into an old machine shop, and you have a machine shop manager who says, we don't need robots to tend our machines. We're just going to have our people do that. And then all of a sudden you have another person saying, no, I want my skilled worker to actually be doing you know tasks that he's skilled at. Now where he has to stand by a machine and take a part out, put a new part in, close the door, push a button. No, we can automate that stuff instead. So all of a sudden, the fear of technology that older generations tend to have, I would say, is being replaced by younger generations who don't fear technology but embrace it and want to make it so our lives are easier to
Yeah,
do. Our jobs are easier. The tasks are easier.
right. You're also just not going to find someone to unload that machine 100 times a day, right? They might do it 20, right?
Yeah.
And, there's a lot
Well,
of automation you can put in place before you get to cobots, but yeah, it's
yeah,
very different.
absolutely. Like I even look at just end of line solutions, right? With palletization of coming off of a conveyor into a pallet. I remember seeing dozens and dozens of jobs where people would literally have a conveyor and they just take parts and they put it on a pallet over and over again, and that's not exciting. That gives manufacturing a bad rep because it's that boring, dull part of manufacturing that we want to make more exciting. And I always call it the dinner table discussion. It's a lot more exciting for a person to say, oh yeah, I work in program robots and I'm a technician for a robot, versus that's doing palletization, versus, oh, I stand by a conveyor and put product on a pallet all day long. Well, one is you're going to get paid a lot more by being a robot technician than you are a box palletizer. You're going to save your back long term. You're not going to be as miserable and tired coming off of work every day, where then all of a sudden you can't go outside and play soccer with your kid in the front yard because you're so physically exhausted. Now all of a sudden we're changing the I guess you could say we're changing the way we're working in manufacturing through technology, which at the end of the day is hopefully making it a lot more exciting and engageable for the next generation of people to be a part of it.
Yeah, I mean, we see it with we a number of the kids on our first robotics team. We actually got them internships at one of our customers, and yes, to some extent they were sweeping the floors and doing other stuff. But as their kind of summer went on, they started, started running some machines, and they started getting really good at that, and they started whatever, right? Helping with a tool management program and helping with whatever else came up. But kind of as they went along, they realized, okay, yes, there's a certain barrier of entry to what maybe is needed to know for useful context, but gets pretty exciting pretty quick, right? Especially if you're in a business that's newer to modernizing a lot of this stuff. In this particular case, the owner, he's, I think under 40, recently bought the shop, super dirty when he originally got it, and now it's probably one of the nicer ones in the area, right? And kind of as he's gone along, he's been able to hire better people, hire, kind of a set of salaried people kind of in the middle that, can help drive those improvements, can help sit there and spend a few hours on CAM or optimizing different cycle times, right? And it's just incredible how quickly you can transform a business like that.
Oh, absolutely.
If you just have the right mindset and get the right people in there.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's just a culture change. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think if we can take these baby steps and change one thing one by one, it's the right direction that we're moving forward. And I think that's the whole thing, as you mentioned earlier, Tim, was it's an old industry, but it's an old industry with new people, and I think with the right mindset, it's going to make that industry more excitable in the future.
Yeah, I mean, one of the big things that, obviously we make basically ERP or kind of work management software, right? And originally we got into it, right? We're like, okay, actually the original product coming out of college was an IoT like tracking solution, right? And obviously there's a ton of those and there's good value to that. But then as we went to go sell it to people and to go tour these shops, we're like, well, sure, we can give you a sensor to put on your machine, right? But your guys don't even know what to do. They're getting their work on Post-it notes, right? You have an Excel sheet that runs your whole shop. And we kind of dug into it. Okay, why do you not use the software? It's like, oh, well, the job boss rep came and tried to sell it. It's an on-prem system, right? It's ancient. No one's ever going to get anything done in it. Just like if we try to put that on our floor, like it's just going to get thrown right out, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of took that and started very basic, right? Started with just, okay, cool, we'll give you guys a work list and we'll let you track where your parts are, right? And basically starting at the shop floor, working a good amount of time with those operators, and then kind of branching out to make sure that management can give them the right information, right? Because as management, I think that's one of the more important things you can do, is to just make sure your people have the right tools to be effective, right? If you have no way of giving them the right work, you definitely have no way of measuring it, and you definitely have no way of improving it, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of that was our takeaway from it, and since then we've been very passionate about making that accessible to everyone, right? So
Yeah.
Maybe 6 or 7 months ago, we went our product self-serve, which certainly has its certainly makes some things difficult from a sales side of things every once in a while, because people are like, well, like it's already so great in the free version. We're like, yes, but there's a lot of other features in the paid version. So there's that we go back and forth with, but we just believe really strongly that there should be something where if you want to modernize your shop tomorrow, you can, right? You don't have to wait for permission or a 5-6 month sales cycle to do it. And we've seen shops do that. And it's pretty incredible being part of those transformation stories.
Well, I think you talk about the sales cycle as well. Is I think with the industry, you see a lot of new business moving from more of a capital expense to an operational expense in a lot of cases. And so if companies are if we're able to create technology and solutions that come into more of an op than a cap expenses, I think it moves things along a lot faster as well. One, because it reduces risk, right? If you're going out there and you're getting ready to invest in a super large capital project, there's a lot of signatures that need to happen in order to make that work. Versus an op expense where, yeah, I could do this and I have a monthly allowance of X amount of dollars and you fall within that, we can make that happen. And I think a lot of it too has to do with just, I would argue, the general cost of automation is going down a lot, right? If you wanted to buy a 6-axis robot back in 2000 or 2010 even, fast forward and look at every 10 years, the cost of a robot would have been I would say it's going down 25 to 30% per decade. And I'm not for sure exactly what rates are going at. I would love to go back and look at, hey, what would the cost have been to put a 6-axis palletizing robot in back in 1990, one back in 2000, another one back in 2010, and then here in 2020, 2024, and just to see what cost was. And to get feedback that way, I would just say, automation's getting cheaper. Automation's getting easier to use. Automation's getting easier to implement. And I think it's one of those things where is if you can reduce the risk from any perspective, from a software solution side that you guys are doing to a digital side to a physical manufacturing or maintenance or automation solution, if you can make things simpler to use, they're going to be adopted a lot easier because then all of a sudden you don't need a technical specialist to do it, right? I remember back when, geez, you had you needed you wanted to put a robot on the floor. You needed to have an engineer, or you needed to have you wanted to put a PLC. You needed to have a 4-year degreed engineer in order to do something like this. Versus now all of a sudden where, hey, you don't need to have an engineer. You could have a person who has 3 years of experience programming and making their own 3D printers and knows how to code because they watched on YouTube. And then, then all of a sudden, it's one of those things where the barrier to entry to automation is so much lower than what it was years ago. And I think that's why it's so exciting. And that's why I think it's so important to get, going back to what I said earlier, Tim, was getting the next generation excited, because these kids who are in high school, they pick up Raspberry Pis and Arduino and propeller boards and learn how to program and make their own websites when they're 16 years old. And
they just get it.
Why aren't we getting them more in our industry versus the other, .com and app industries that are out there? Like, there's so much opportunity here in manufacturing as well. So those skill sets exist. It's just a hard time attracting them into our industry is what we still got to keep working on.
Yeah. I wonder, why do you think those other industries have such a better time getting people? Is it just because everyone knows that the career path is 120 grand at the end of that, or what do you think?
They're sexier. I think it's one of those things where this whole idea of the tech, the tech buzz that was out there, California, and go out there and you be a CS guy and you can go out there and write code and stay at your home office and get 140,000 a year, 100,000, 140,000 a year, and it's one of those things where the industry's shifting. Where those jobs do exist now. We also seen a lot of variability and fluctuation with those jobs. I'm really curious to see what happens when AI becomes a lot more relevant. Because the one thing that AI is doing is AI is going to be replacing jobs. It's going to happen. I would also argue that that manufacturing is probably one of the most resilient industries to AI in a lot of cases, because AI can't make products at the end of the day.
Right.
There's many, I guess you could say, segments between AI and the finished good versus AI and written code, if that makes sense. There will be shifts that are happening in the industry, but I truly think that getting a skilled trade in manufacturing is way more stable long term, because people will still need people who have skilled trades on how to create, how to be an HVAC professional, electrician, or a machinist, or a robot programmer. Those skills arguably are way more valuable, I would say, in the next 10 to 15 to 20 years than a person who could write code. I think, the idea of writing code is going to be heavily automated. And who's to say? I mean, I might be off by 20 years. So don't quote me on by 2044 all code is gonna be written by AI. But I would say it's one of those industry trends I think is moving in the direction, and it's coming back, right? We were told for so long, don't go into skilled trades because there's no value. Go get a 4-year degree because that's the sexiest thing to do. Well, now all of a sudden, when 70% of the people who are graduating from college don't even use their degree, reality check, there's 3 million less people who are going to 4-year degrees going into next year than there was before the pandemic. Like massive chunks and numbers that we're seeing as a shift in the industry going forward.
No, for sure. And Yeah, it's one of those things where, I mean, obviously we're a software company, right? So we see the AI tools, we use the AI tools, right? Um, and it's amazing how much more one software engineer in this case can do, right? Um, but when you look at manufacturing, right, you're physically producing things, and there's just only so many. There's only so fast you can remove material or add material to something, right? So you're limited at some point. Um, Now it's some of our investors also have companies that write automatic CAM. There's companies, I mean, we have a million different 3D printers, some of which do really cool things where they detect vibration patterns and stabilize themselves like that. So it's helping with the repetitiveness and making things repeatable, right? But it's not gonna fundamentally change everything else. And I think even the California crowd is realizing this. We Are you familiar with Y Combinator?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got into Y Combinator like I guess about a year ago. We ended up not going, but at the time, most of their kind of request for startups, right? This is a list they put out every year, had a lot of stuff on there with AI and computer stuff and all this other stuff. But if you look at that list now, it's enterprise resource planning software, manufacturing, like there's a lot of categories on there all of a sudden.
Yep.
Where they're like, oh shit, if we can't make that any more efficient, let's go back to the next frontier, right? Which is in some ways almost the oldest frontier of technology, right? Which is manufacturing. It's just kind of, it was the first thing that's automated, and it kind of had a bit of a lull there, and now I think we're back, and we're happy to be a part of it.
And at the end of the day, people will always be consuming something at some level, and I think that's what makes manufacturing so exciting. Is whenever a new product's invented, it will need to be manufactured, and maybe there's different means of the way it's manufactured, but the industry will always be making stuff. And I think that's what just makes it so exciting for long-term opportunities.
Yeah, and I think obviously reshoring and all that is becoming a larger trend. I think I was listening to a podcast that you did, and it's something like what the labor, you might be able to say this better, but the gap in labor costs between overseas and here is like massively different now. I think you had said it was something between, it used to be 30x expensive in the US, and now it's only 2 or 3x, right?
Yeah. So like the labor shortage cost back in like the 1980s, 1990s, it was 30 times cheaper for general labor in China compared to the U.S. Where now it's right under 4%. And I think it just goes to show that this idea of cheap labor that exists overseas is not what it was. Now there's cheaper labor in other parts of the world, but when you look at even a country like China, who's heavily automating, who's the largest country, the country that's adopting and integrating the most industrial robots by a multi-factor compared to other super large manufacturing countries. It just goes to show that the trend is automation, even in what we thought was, an Asia-based manufacturing market wasn't the case, but it is now.
Right. And I mean, there's just so many other fixed costs of moving things across the world that are only getting more expensive, that I think it's just not really worth it for a lot of people, right?
Yeah. And I think with that, as well, is you look at this idea of nearshoring as well. Like reshoring is happening, especially when I think coming out of the pandemic, a lot of countries or a lot of companies saw how susceptible they were to the supply chain and how vulnerable they were to supply chain. And then they're realizing that, well, geez, I need to make now products that are much more closer. I need to work with suppliers that are a lot closer. Then nearshoring, happening down in Mexico or Canada and places, and also reshoring is becoming a lot more relevant and really a lot more. It makes a lot more economical sense as well, because this idea of cheap product being made overseas anymore, with the increased time in supply chain and the increasing costs. There's a lot of opportunity for now manufacturers, especially ones that are adopting automation and becoming more digital, to be more productive, and also at the end of the day, just a lot more competitive.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's coming whether you like it or not, right? So
Yeah.
I guess a lot of our audience, and customer base, right, is these smaller kind of under 30 or 40 person, other small OEMs, a lot of machine shops,
Yeah.
some machine builders, etc. What's your recommendation for people like that who don't have a lot of technology in place yet? Maybe they're QuickBooks plus Excel sheet or something somewhere in that vein. What's your advice to them on where do you get started?
Yeah.
How do you, and then how do you kind of transition and make your shop attractive?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I know we're running low on time, so I'll kind of throw in a bunch of stuff in here as our final question was, you look at the industry as a whole, and around 98.6% of all the manufacturing companies in the United States are qualified as a small to medium sized business. So a small business is between under 100 or 150 employees, depending on what research you get out there. And then a medium-sized business is anywhere between that 150, 100 and 500. Like 74% of all manufacturers in the U.S. are qualified as a small business. So when we think of manufacturing, a lot of times we see these massive enterprise corporations that are adapting all the latest technology. But in reality, a lot of companies can't afford that massive enterprise. You can't hire a chief technology officer of robotics and automation. That's not the likely, direction, right? A lot of the times your manager is the guy that's making sure that the plant floor is running, on top of making sure production's scheduled, on top of, making sure that we're looking at new technology that we can use. So to answer your question, where do companies start when they look at wanting to change the culture and the technology? I think the big thing, there's a couple of things that immediately come to mind. One is the available resources that are out there to help small companies are pretty wide now. If you're, whatever state that you are in listening to this, there is a local MEP, which is a Manufacturing Extension Partnership, which is put on by NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, and there is funding in every state for these organizations to come into your facility and support you, and to look at your floor that's happening and recommend you the best technology that's available. And really all you have to do is, it's free to you in a lot of cases. You might have to pay a small fee or something like that, but being able to have local experts and professionals come in who understand your industry, who understand that's a place to start. So like if you're in Michigan or whatever state, MMTC in the right place, or the organizations here in Michigan that help, but every state has one. Get involved with that way through MEP. The next thing I would suggest going to is go to your local trade show. In a lot of cases, and there's probably a trade show within a state or two, or depending on the state you're in, probably a couple right in your state. But go out there, spend a day to go out and talk to other experts in the industry and network. Be a part of your local college or university's advisory board or program. It's amazing the connections and things that you can learn when you're a part of that, rather than trying to be in your own silo of a process and you're not out there understanding what other companies are doing. You don't know how you can change unless you talk to other people, because you don't understand what change actually exists. That's where I would start. The other thing is, like, the amazing thing about automation is automation comes in at multiple different levels and scales, from physical assets that are on your floor to digital solutions that drive productivity and make what you're doing easier. And so that would be my suggestion: is don't be afraid to go out and try things that are low risk, low cost, and if you fail quickly and you don't feel it in the bank. That's where I would say start. I mean, there's tons of resources out there, but getting out there and networking and not being afraid to open up your doors is the best way, an opportunity for you to grow.
Yeah, for sure. Like, or even just start with make a LinkedIn account, right? So many of these people we talk to, like, they're not on LinkedIn, they're not on anything, right? So it's very hard for them to connect with others. But when they do, those groups are super active, right? Yeah. There's Facebook groups, there's all sorts of stuff. But cool. Yeah. Any other closing thoughts for our audience, or just kind of anything you'd like people to take away?
I'll wrap up with saying, create a LinkedIn account when you do. Follow me on LinkedIn. I always love when new people follow me. I share daily content and manufacturing processes and technology and conversations around workforce and culture. So, check me out.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks so much, Jake.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Tim.